For years, Sam Heughan has answered questions about Caitríona Balfe in a way that felt almost rehearsed, calm, respectful, and carefully contained within clear boundaries. So when he finally spoke about working with her in a way that felt more personal, more unfiltered than usual, fans immediately noticed the difference. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a shocking statement, but something subtler, and in many ways, more revealing. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't come from what is said directly, but from what changes in the way it's expressed. The moment came during what seemed like a familiar setup, the kind of interview where the same topics resurface again and again. Questions about Outlander, about chemistry, about what makes his partnership with Caitríona so compelling, nothing new, nothing unexpected. And at first, his response followed the same pattern fans had come to recognize, acknowledging their professional relationship, their shared experience, and the trust they've built over time. But then, something shifted. Instead of moving quickly past the topic, Sam lingered slightly longer than usual, choosing words that felt more reflective than structured. He spoke about how rare it is to find someone you can completely rely on in every moment, not just in scenes, but throughout the entire process of creating something together. That phrase alone stood out, not because it was dramatic, but because of how naturally it came out, less like a prepared answer, and more like a genuine realization. What made the moment even more noticeable was his tone. There was a softness, a kind of quiet sincerity that hadn't always been present in earlier interviews. He didn't deflect, didn't redirect the conversation as quickly as he often has in the past. Instead, he stayed with the thought, allowing it to unfold in a way that felt less controlled, more open. And for someone who has always maintained such a clear boundary between public and private, that openness felt new. Fans quickly began comparing this to previous interviews, and the contrast became difficult to ignore. In the past, Sam's responses were consistent, carefully balanced between warmth and distance, always reinforcing the idea of professionalism. But this time, while he didn't contradict that narrative, he didn't emphasize it as strongly either. It was as if the need to define the relationship had softened, replaced by a willingness to simply describe what it feels like. There was also a moment, brief, but telling, where he paused before continuing, as if considering how much to say. It wasn't hesitation in the sense of uncertainty, but more like awareness, a recognition that what he was expressing carried more weight than usual. And that pause, combined with the shift in tone, gave the entire response a different energy. One particular line stood out more than anything else. He described their connection as something that you don't question anymore, you just trust it. On the surface, it sounds simple, even expected from longtime co-stars. But within the context of how carefully he has always spoken about Caitríona, it felt more personal than fans were used to hearing. It suggested a level of comfort, of certainty, that went beyond the usual description of a working relationship. As clips of the interview began to circulate, reactions came quickly. Some fans saw this as the most genuine Sam had ever sounded when speaking about Caitríona, interpreting it as a sign that their connection had evolved into something deeper over time. Others remained cautious, pointing out that nothing he said directly contradicted what he has always maintained, that their relationship is rooted in trust and collaboration. But even among those who were skeptical, there was agreement on one thing: this felt different. What makes this moment so compelling is how subtle that difference is. There's no clear statement, no definitive shift in narrative, nothing that can be pointed to as a direct revelation. And yet, the feeling it leaves behind is unmistakable. It lingers in the tone, in the pauses, in the way his words seem less guarded and more lived in. There's also the possibility that this change reflects something broader: time, experience, the natural evolution of a long-term creative partnership. After years of working together, of building something as emotionally complex as Outlander, it's almost inevitable that the way he speaks about that connection would deepen. What once needed to be carefully defined may now feel too familiar to explain in simple terms. Still, the timing raises questions. Why does this shift happen now, after so many years of consistency? Is it simply comfort, the result of no longer needing to control every interpretation? Or is it something else, something that hasn't been fully expressed, but is beginning to show in small, almost unintentional ways. Now, as fans replay his words and analyze every detail, the focus isn't just on what Sam said. It's on what felt different about it. And when someone who has always been so controlled begins to sound just a little more open, even in the smallest way, it becomes impossible not to wonder what that change really means. As the clip continued to circulate, the focus quickly shifted from the words themselves to what they might reveal beneath the surface. Fans weren't just listening to what Sam said, they were analyzing how he said it, comparing it to years of carefully measured responses. And in that comparison, a subtle but noticeable change began to stand out. It wasn't about a new piece of information, but about a new way of expressing something that may have always been there. Some fans believe this moment marks a genuine shift, not in the relationship itself, but in how Sam is willing to talk about it. After years of maintaining a consistent boundary, it's possible that time has allowed him to relax that structure slightly, to speak more openly without feeling the need to define every detail. In that sense, the difference isn't about revealing something hidden, it's about no longer needing to protect it in the same way. Others, however, see the situation differently. They argue that the meaning hasn't changed at all, that what people are hearing as more personal is simply a more natural version of the same message he has always delivered. When someone repeats similar answers over many years, even a slight variation in tone can feel significant. And in an environment where every word is examined closely, that variation can easily be interpreted as something deeper than it actually is. This is where perception begins to play a powerful role. The connection between Sam and Caitríona has always carried a level of intensity that invites interpretation, and that context shapes how moments like this are received. A line that might otherwise feel ordinary becomes meaningful because of who is saying it, and because of the history behind it. And once that meaning is attached, it becomes difficult to separate what is real from what is being projected onto it. There's also the factor of emotional investment. For many fans, the connection between Sam and Caitríona isn't just something they observe, it's something they feel connected to. Over years of watching their story unfold, both on and off screen, that connection becomes part of a larger narrative that people want to understand. And when a moment like this appears, it naturally becomes a focal point, a piece of the story that might finally bring clarity. At the same time, Sam's response still aligns with the boundaries he has always maintained. He didn't redefine the relationship, didn't introduce new terms or labels, didn't step outside of what he has consistently expressed. What changed was the tone, the way the connection was described, the way the words carried a sense of familiarity rather than explanation. And that distinction is subtle, but important. Some fans have started to see this as a sign of evolution rather than revelation. Not a moment where something new is uncovered, but a moment where something existing is expressed more naturally. When you spend years building a connection with someone, the need to explain it can fade, replaced by a simple understanding that doesn't require definition. And that kind of shift can easily be felt, even if it's never directly stated. Still, the ambiguity remains, and that's what keeps the conversation going. Because without a clear confirmation, every interpretation exists in parallel. One moment can support multiple meanings, depending on what someone chooses to focus on. And in that space, the story continues, not as a fixed truth, but as a possibility that evolves with each new perspective. What makes this moment so compelling is that it doesn't resolve anything, it deepens the question. It moves the focus away from what is happening, and toward how we understand what we're seeing. And that shift changes everything, because it places the meaning not just in Sam's words, but in the way those words are received.